Some conversations will be mind-blowing and you'll sit there and you'll have the most profound change. So Alison, 52 conversations, thank you so much for joining me.
Pleasure.
We're here with this beautiful view and backdrop, so it deserved being videoed purposefully.
Absolutely.
I've got to start with how did you end up here at the National Sailing Academy? It's almost like, let's start with where you are and maybe we'll go back as to how the journey unfolded.
I guess. I mean, it started with me moving to Antigua, with the whole journey through getting to know about sailing in the industry. But ultimately, I think the fact that I'm here is probably down to the fact that I had cancer last year, or the year before, in fact. And when the job was offered to me, prior to me getting ill, I was considering it, and when I was ill, I was away from Antigua for 7 months. I lay in bed or I lay having chemo and thought, oh, I can't wait to get back to Falmouth Harbour, get on a boat and skid across the harbour.
Get out there.
Yeah. And I loved everything this place stood for. One of the biggest issues, obviously, when you have cancer, not obviously, but you get lots of time to think, although I worked the whole way through it.
I was going to say, you were pretty active from what I remember.
Yeah.
There was still all this work coming out.
Exactly. Right? And, you know, that was actually what a trial run for COVID. Everyone working from home, you know, and I certainly was. The team were phenomenal, carried on running things here. And, of course, I got time for contemplation. I spent some time on my own and I started thinking about what do I want to do in my life. And the difficult thing was there's lots I am doing. I wear many hats, and I know for a lot of people that's confusing. That's fine. It can be for me sometimes. But what I did know was I loved this place. I loved everything it stood for, and I could see me being here for the next few years. I really wanted to. Yeah. So when I got back, I came to see Elizabeth, and we kind of said, okay, well, let's wait till Sailing Week's over and we'll have the conversation. And of course, Sailing Week didn't happen. So the conversation happened faster, and here I am.
Here you are. So, I mean, you've gone straight into something really meaty there, you know, talking about cancer.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to come back to that later, if that's okay. So I don't know your story. I mean, we've known each other in various different ways over the years that I've been here, but I don't know your story. And 52 Conversations is all about people's stories and things that maybe they've overcome, paths they've navigated to end up where they are now. So how did you even get to Antigua? But I guess before that, what were you doing? What were you doing? Was it anything to do with Antigua, the sea?
Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. I was working in London in retail. I'd been in head office retail. So I was a very senior manager. I was on a great salary, you know, very nice perks, lots of travel, house, car, husband. We had it all.
Corporate, very corporate.
Very corporate. My husband was working in banking in the city. However, his Antiguan heritage brought us here. So his parents were born in English Harbour, and we went backwards and forwards and eventually said, what are we doing? Let's give it a try. So that was 2003. But, you know, who am I? If you really want to know, I'm still the council house girl who wore glasses, had a crossed eye when she was born, was overweight. Mum and dad split up, so that was a whole thing, you know, to just be with a mother. That was who I was and who I am inside. And I think especially growing up with a mum, I never actually lived with my dad. They split up before I was born. And I remember having an argument with someone here, probably about 10 years ago, and I felt at the time it was a boss, kind of boss, and it was something I was volunteering for. And he was really, really frustrated. It was a great lesson for me, actually, very frustrated, because I was being very kind to volunteer and do stuff for him for free. But that meant he had to wait for me, for my time, you know, and that was very challenging when things had to be done. Yeah. And, you know, and now when I look at the industry I'm in, that's some of the issues around the industry, because it's so heavily reliant on volunteerism, and that's wrong, in my opinion, in a lot of cases, because it is an industry. But anyway, I remember him really losing his rag about something, and I sat there and I put the phone down. So I thought, you don't need, I'm the sort of person, and there was an issue. When there's an issue, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to solve the issue, put things right. And then I'm going to go back and say, well, what could we have done better? It's not about blame. It's not about anything.
What's the learning?
Yeah. And I actually said to him, listen, I didn't grow up in an environment where I had had by right, or what do you think, by I don't know what the word is, entitlement, whatever, to respect a male figure. I didn't have one at all. I had an incredibly strong mother, and fortunately for me, she was smart. She was, you know, we often say she was born before her time. She was really smart. She was amazing. She died when she was 62. And that really was a big thing for me. She died the year before I moved here. And, you know, at that point, I was like, hell, life is too short. Let's get on and do what you want to do.
62 is young, right?
Very young, yeah. 64, sorry, gosh, she wasn't quite that young, but 64. But it's still young. And she was incredibly young for her age, you know. So the thing being, though, that I hadn't really recognised until that point how important I knew how important she was to me, but how much she'd moulded and shaped me in my lack of fear of male authority. But I think the flip side of that, and the industry I worked in, was women. You know, retail is very women-led. It was women's clothing, baby care, toys, you know, great jobs, fun jobs. And it was mainly women. So again, when probably about 5 or 6 years ago, just before I was 50, I was asked to get involved in a women's entrepreneurship day and to be a speaker. And one of the questions, we were on a panel, there was 4 of us, great women, and still in contact with them. And one of the people that had attended the day said, how would I have been challenged by women in my career? And I sat there and I thought, honestly speaking, I'd never even thought about it until she asked me the question.
Right.
Because I've been lucky enough, I suppose, not to have that challenge in general. But realising that having moved to Antigua, slightly different situation where there were challenges of that kind, and suddenly I found out how important the fellowship of women is and the support of women in business especially, but obviously in life. So yeah, quite interesting.
It's really interesting because you touched on so many topics just in there. So if we go back to childhood, did you really have an awareness that your mum was holding everything together?
Very much so, actually. She was multitasker to the nth degree.
So I'm assuming she was working when you were
She was working many jobs. So she would work a day job, and then we'd have dinner, and then she'd carry on. She was bookkeeping, so she would do bookkeeping jobs for people. She would do cleaning jobs for people. She was always on the hustle. The other thing about her, actually, you mentioned earlier on about you don't like structure, and I feel I'm a bit similar because of the upbringing. I always remember her talking about clubs, you know, people, as she was getting older, some of her friends saying, why don't you join a club? And she would say, but doesn't that mean I have to be in the same place at the same time with the same people every week? Hell no, I don't want that.
She didn't want
that. Yeah, you know, and that really kind of went in with me, but in probably it's kind of manifested itself in negative ways in some senses, because I've almost railed against structure. And I think now, as I'm getting older, I'm starting to understand and recognise that actually it's very important. Obviously, the other thing, you know, you look back and think, gosh, all the things you learnt as a kid really do form habits for you. And some of mine weren't necessarily great. So, you know, as you get older again and you try to have more self-awareness and think, what do I need to put right? You know, it's
interesting. So when you were saying that, I was thinking about the word conformity came to my mind. How do you feel about conformity then? So I was kind of getting that because I mean we are very similar is what's coming across to me in the way that you're describing those things. So yeah, we all need a structure. You know, if I want to do 52 conversations, there has to be a structure. Yeah, if there's any wiggle room for me to be freestyle, to be the wildling that I want to be, I will find that way. And you kind of strike me that that's what comes out in you as well.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing is now, especially having moved to the Sailing Academy, where there isn't much more structure required in the daily role. You know, we have schools attending, we have courses, we have a hotel to run, a lot going on, and there's a lot of stuff that has to be done, and then there's a team to manage who are doing huge elements of that. Then I realised there has to be structure, you know. But also I think the flip side of being flexible, and this is really important to me, is I think especially in a small society like Antigua, there's lots of jobs, and there's rarely do you find people that know everything they need to know in their job, me included. And so what I think I'm really good at doing is saying, okay, this is what I know, so who can I find that knows these two things so that we can get the job done? And whether that be sailing week, whether it be what we're planning on a daily basis, whatever it is, Antigua Nice, you know, I'm willing to be really flexible with the team. And a lot of the time, I think if you sit down with a team member and kind of find out what is it they like, what do they want to do, and try and harness that passion, you'll get a lot further as a whole.
Absolutely. It's really interesting. So basically you're using connections, and connection is key. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the human condition is to seek connection, whether that be through our personal lives or our business lives. We're always looking for the person that connects in a way. Exactly as you said, you know, you need someone to do something. Where can I find that person? So that's all really interesting. What was it like when you made the move, though, from the UK to here? Because you'd been coming and going, which is something lots of people do here. I mean, I came for 3 months doing a self-test, 7 years, still kind of here. Okay, it must be working. What was your journey from sort of leaving that very corporate environment to getting here and thinking, okay, I'm not on holiday now, we're here?
Yeah, exactly.
Was it a shock?
Yes and no. I think we came with the full awareness that it might not work, first of all. And so initially we had a home and we put everything in storage and rented the home, knowing that if we didn't like it, we can get it out of storage, get rid of the tenant and go back. We also, actually, I remember saying, if Antigua doesn't work, we didn't know why it wouldn't, but if it didn't work, we said next stop is Greece, I think it was. You know, we were like, we'll go off, we'll try and find our new home. And so from that point of view, I think what was really good is we were never worried about failure. You know, lots of people, oh, what if you go and you hate it? Well, we'll come back. But then we're like that. I'm like that. You know, it's you make mistakes in order to find out what you love in life.
It's experiential learning, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But the reality, of course, of sitting there and saying, and how do you fund this? We were, interestingly, we'd met Jeffrey Piddock before we moved here, and he was co-owner of Antigua Nice.
Right.
So we had a very amusing tour of looking at real estate, because we didn't know where we wanted to live. We were considering buying, we just weren't sure. And Jeffrey, it's an infamous day now, he took us for a half a day tour around this area, and we stopped outside lots of houses, and as far as we were concerned, he told us every reason that wasn't the right house or we weren't the right people for the house. So we get back to his office and I said, so, you know, with the greatest respect, we need a home. He's obviously assumed and decided what we can or can't afford. And
that sounds like Jeffrey.
And I said to him, all right, let's take the cheapest house on your website. And at the time, it was a house in Falmouth. It was 100,000 US. I said, if we bought that house and we lived in it for 6 months and we decided that's it, we're getting back out, what money would we make if we put that on the rental market? So then Jeffrey spent half an hour explaining to me what money he wouldn't make. And at the end of it, I said, with the greatest respect, Jeffrey, I wanted to know how much money I would make. I don't care what you make. And he laughed. And we were really sparring. Of course, that was the point that I learned he loves a good argument. And we got back to England and wrote to him and said, okay, we've decided we're staying with Auntie Roma, and thank you for all your help. And about 2 months later, he wrote back and said, I think I've got a business opportunity for you, and it was Antigua Nice.
So that's interesting, because I always assumed that you started Antigua Nice. I know.
No, it was formed in 1998 by a Canadian guy called Wayne McCourt, I think. I can't remember, it's Wayne. Lots of people in this area know him. He was well ahead of his time. He did a phenomenal job. And he went back to, we then bought his share in the business actually in the end, and then we bought Jeffrey's share in the business. So a year later we owned it fully. But, you know, we spent the first year convincing people of why they should pay, because Wayne had, his assessment of the business was, I created this business so I can afford to sail and drink rum. So when I need money to sail and drink rum, I bill people. In retrospect, that's such a great and simple model.
Well, it works really well, but it's not a great business model for ongoing, right?
Exactly, yeah. And there was a huge amount of barter, and so we were lucky that when we bought the business, it was just when the internet was really kicking in and people were starting to understand what, you know, the digital world. It still, you know, took years to build it, and then of course it led us into, because it's got not just businesses but all the non-profit businesses listed. That's what led us into Sailing Week, Marine Association, and all things sailing. And actually it was Jeffrey's fantastic advice, which was, you must get a network going. I mean, he sat me down and he said, you must stay a member of the Hotel Association, you must be a member of the Marine Association. That's your tribe, you know, you need to to grow those relationships and understand how the community works. So he's you know, to this day he guides me, and that was such great advice. But interestingly, probably about a year and a half in, I remember Colin and I, we went to a marketing meeting. We were asked to be on the marketing committee. Obviously, I can't remember who was running it at the time, and we were the internet guys, you know, the new internet guys, should I say, because there was internet guys around.
Did you already have experience in the internet and all of that stuff? Had it been somewhere that you were already a bit
Colin
experienced?
had done a couple of courses. I hadn't got the technical knowledge, but I'd got the business knowledge, because with the retail business, clothing retail was just getting into it in a big way in the UK, but it still was very small in comparison to what it is now. So I'd got a really good understanding of its potential, I suppose, and I'd kind of, you know,
and your business brain was already buzzing with, this can be really powerful.
Exactly. And I think because of the background in the retail industry, you move around a lot, you know, 9 months, a year and a half, you're moving from a department to a brand, to constantly moving, which gave me, I think it built those skills of assessment, reassessment, and what can you optimise and what do you need to kill. I mean, it was that cutthroat, really, you can imagine in the rag trade, really. And so that, once we started with Antigua Nice, what that meant was I was quite confident in going in and speaking to a business and then not just saying, well, can I have your money? But what are you trying to get out of it? Who are you targeting? Who do you want to get to? Because it's very interesting. You speak to two villa owners next door to each other, and they've got different requirements out of what they need, both in terms of what their vision of their property is, but what money they need. One may not need the money. One may just want to cover the costs, and one is running it as a full-time business to fund themselves. So their expectations from you are very different. So, and that continues to this day in terms of expectation. Obviously, the internet's changed. But what was funny, going back to that meeting, we sat in the marketing meeting, and it was this strange group of English harbour folk. We were living in Piccadilly, and we had one too many people look through us, and we felt very unwelcome, very, this thing isn't for us. The outsiders. And, you know, now I look back and I totally get it, because here you are, the new upstarts, coming in with all your big ideas, you know. And
you know everything.
Yeah, and I mean, although, you know, we've had a few people over the years say to us they liked the fact that we didn't do that in general. But in that environment at the time, we were out being asked for ideas, and one person looked through us one too many times, and we said, you know what, forget that, not interested, and we walked away. So we said, no, we don't want to do that anymore. Walked away from the committee, and it was through the Hotel Association. I was on the board there for a few years when I got involved in Sailing Week, and I came in from the other angle, so that led me back into the industry. And by that time, obviously, I'd got to understand more the industry, the area, the community, and the fact, of course, that there's a huge amount of people that have been here forever and know everything. And the worst thing you can do is pretend you know everything if you don't, and just fess up, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about Antigua Nice and moving into more things to do with sailing. I mean, as soon as I came here, it was like, and I heard your name, really it was sailing, Sailing Week, all these events that are going on. So was event something brand new for you as well? Yeah,
I'd never been involved in the event business in England. Partied plenty, but not actually
appreciated good events.
Yeah, absolutely. So Antigua Nice was the leading on a lot of it, because obviously when we bought the business, it was a very static website, and from the beginning I'd kind of had this vision of a timeout type of thing. And it was about 2007, 2008, and actually it was to do with Sailing Week that was really the reason that I finally felt it was time that we could start looking at feeding the monster that Antigua Nice is, because there was an issue and there was an event move, and everyone was complaining that they didn't know what was going on. And I got in touch with the then chairman of Sailing Week and said, look, do you want me to get something out to our mailing list? We had a couple of thousand people on the mailing list at that point. And I went through it with him and I sent it out, and I got so many positive responses. Oh, it's really great. We know what's going on now. And I thought, oh, right, okay, the time's right. But the site was still a very old static website. So it was quite clunky to start with, and there was a lot of manual stuff. And we started it through the newsletters. That's when we started the What's On newsletter. And then we updated the site. So it's a database site. and we're working again on it. I mean, it so needs it, and we're ready for that. But at that point, you know, it was a great new thing. I think we relaunched in 2009, early 2009, because that's when, of course, the world was going into major recession, and it, you know, it killed us as much as it killed every business at that point. But we were out there, and we were, you know, in the summer, we used to say to clients, we're going to make something out of nothing, because obviously there were times when they're literally everywhere was closed, or lots of places were closed. All the hotels used to close for the whole summer at that point. And we were able to just keep the name of Antigua out there. So I guess that was what helped me have connections around the island. And it was the fact that we then started getting into updating websites, and we were asked to update Sailing Week. That was the lead in to then Hotel Association, and sport fishing. Actually, sport fishing was the first event I got involved in, which was great fun. And I think I did one event, and then we created the Frankie Noons tournament when Frankie Noons died. And it was a new tournament, and it was based at the Cat Club, and it was just phenomenal. It was the tournament and seafood festival, and worked with the chairman, Philip Schall, and Tracy was involved, and a guy called Robbie at the time, who was bringing the whole idea of, I think he kind of was quite early in capturing what was happening events-wise, and Facebook had started kicking off, and all of it, you know, so the whole thing just started.
So it all
growing.
kind of grew around itself.
And, you know, still a certain amount of resistance from clients and businesses. Oh, you don't need that, you know, I've got this business. So yeah, that was the lead in. And then with Sailing Week, so literally the first thing I did, I think, was the Facebook page on Sailing Week, when I officially started volunteering. And then it became a role which was local marketing. Then it got to international marketing, which then starts bringing you sponsorship relationships, and then you're into the event, and then you're off, kind of thing.
So much communication, right?
Huge,
across a huge demographic and all kinds of people.
Yeah.
So is that something that really feeds you, though?
I suppose so. I mean, the thing is that it's constant. The only constant is it's changing, you know. I mean, it's every day is different. Right now, because once we took on Sailing Week, and at the time it was myself off the water, if you like, and Kathy Lammers on the water. We worked as a partnership for years. And also that was when we took on the Secretariat of the Marine Association and the Caribbean Sailing Association. And the CSA is an organisation, it's like an umbrella organisation across the region. And as Sailing Week has been a member of it for years, so you end up becoming involved in it, because you're then working with other like-minded people, your peers across the region. And then you're talking about regional marketing, and you're talking about how can we hold our place on the calendar. And it's a really interesting dance, because over the years, we've now got to the stage where we're quite open as regatta managers among ourselves. It wasn't always as open, because obviously we're competitors as well.
I was going to say it's a competitive edge, but actually you need to be together because it's community, right?
Exactly. And I think the thing that we've really clicked into as a group is, you know, we all know boats move, right? That's the nature of it. That's why people are doing it. You're on the boat, you're moving. And when there's different segments of the market, but racing, you're going to go to the best races. So the bottom line is you're never going to keep them a racing boat in Antigua for the whole season, because they want to go and hit the circuit. To get them to the region, they want to know everything that's going on. So if you work together as all the events and get the boats here, then you can fight it out to see which event they come to. And now, especially with digital marketing, it becomes so much easier to work together. And there's been huge comfort in that community in the last 2 years. Actually, since Maria and Irma, that was unbelievable. And then when with COVID hitting and the cancellations, and trying to work together on protocols and work out what we can do and what we can't do, how we can keep the participation of sailing as high as possible, so you don't lose your calendar slot, so you don't lose interest. You know, so many great conversations going on regionally. So they've been a major support group. And it all just feeds off each other, you know. So as you get to know your event more, you then get interested in this kind of whole other thing going on across the region.
Yeah.
And I think with the CSA, we then especially started looking at sailing development. So even though we're international regattas, we said the only way we can increase participation, or one of the only ways, is by getting more people on the islands to sail.
Yeah.
And that's where this place came in. And because that's its reason for being, you know, it's going out to the schools in Antigua and reaching out to Antiguans to get them the experience of sailing.
Which is an amazing thing, because that's
Unbelievable.
that's what should be happening on the islands, right?
Yeah,
it should
exactly.
be like local community.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's kind of like, not the us and them, but it is kind of like that, right? Because
Totally.
you're looking at these people coming in all the time that's saying, well, why aren't we involved in this? Why don't we know about this? So that's something you're really passionate about making sure that like the local people get all the opportunities too.
Absolutely. And because, you know, going back to who am I, this is my opportunity. I got all the help as a, you know, and honestly speaking, came from a very poor upbringing, but as I said, a phenomenal mother.
Yeah.
I was given opportunities and I was given support to get to do what I'm doing. And being here now, I see that I have that opportunity in my career to do the same for the kids that need that help. And, you know, what Elizabeth has created here, I mean, I can't believe the 10 years, 11 years now, that from when she started it, what it has become, the energy that must have taken from her, you know, is incredible.
But clearly something she was super passionate about.
Oh, totally.
It had to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really cool. I want to backtrack a little bit to, did you ever envisage that Sailing Week would become the massive thing that it's become? If people are watching and listening to this, then give them a snapshot of what a Sailing Week is normally like when it happens, because it's just full on, right?
Well, first of all, I think I challenged the statement. I think I challenged a statement about, would you envisage it is coming as big as it's become? Because of course many people would say, well, it's got smaller, and it has.
Right.
And that's about the change in the industry, you know. And again, this is where, gosh, never said this publicly.
Okay.
This is where I have to not worry about what people think anymore. I know what I know. I know this event was 250, 260 boats. And I know that from the feedback, it grew too big and it became too many things to too many people. And it wasn't what it needed to be to the sailors. And they are the reason for the event.
So that it happens.
It lost some of its focus. And so there was a need to bring that focus back. Now, in losing its focus, in actual fact, the numbers started dying off from early 2000s, and by 2010 you're down to just over 100 boats a year, a week, which is where it stayed.
And did you, in your opinion, is that based on it just lost the focus of what it was supposed to be about? It wasn't so much about the sailors. So
no, there's two or three, there's more than 2 or 3 things, but there's a phenomenal amount of things actually that happened in really the 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10 era. And a few of those were World Recession, and Sailing Week is the one, I think, the one event that we have in Antigua that is the or least recession proof, because it's the demographic is much broader. We get everybody from big boat owners to, you know, not basically people that are coming in and they're sailing for free with a group of mates, or they've bought a place on a head boat. They've sailed over, you know, as many people as they can fit on from Guadeloupe, whatever it is. So that's what's great about the event. So it isn't as recession proof, because once you have got problems, you're affecting, you know, all layers of the economy. We had Antigua Super Yacht started annually 2010, I think it was. The Caribbean 600 was probably the biggest thing that impacted Sailing Week, which started in 2009. And that meant that the hot racing boats now had the hottest race concept practically of the year in February in Antigua, which meant, first of all, it's offshore racing. It is very different to Sailing Week, but it meant that those boats now focused on coming in February. And then probably not the nail in the coffin, but the really issue was Les Voiles de St. Bart's started in St. Bart's, and the timing of that event is earlier and better on the calendar, in all honesty, for what's going on internationally. Because we then also, the same year that Les Voiles started, an event started in Palma, which now has 300 boats, and that is that is practically the same week as Sailing Week. So you suddenly got boats wanting to get across to the Med much earlier. And of course, like every island, every country in the world wants to start things earlier and finish them longer because they want to extend the season.
Absolutely.
So we've had many conversations over the years about should we move Sailing Week forward. But actually, if we did that, we would close English Harbour. That's the reality because boats haven't got a reason to stay around. So it's quite an interesting dance that you have to look at. And actually, when you go back to the reason Sailing Week was created, and it was a bunch of cruisers that got together for some fundraising, and then the Hotel Association got involved. It was to extend the season. That was it, and to market Antigua. Yeah. Cool. So at that time, you had the boat show in December, and you didn't have anything else. So now you've got the boat show in December, the Caribbean 600 in February, the super yacht in March, classics at the beginning of April, and Sailing Week at the end. And of course, classics used to be part of Sailing Week as well, and that split out. We have what is a very enviable calendar of events that no other island has. We're very, very lucky. And now with things like the Optinam, the Opti Worlds we hosted, where we get the summer events, then it's amazing what we've achieved in Antigua.
It's opening it up.
Yeah.
For more
and if you look at the economic impact of that whole industry, it's enormous. So it used to be just the yacht show and Sailing Week, and now it's all this other stuff in between, plus the marinas, because look, we've still got boats here and there's no events happening.
Absolutely. So the dreaded C word, as in COVID, what did that do to everything? When that first hit, was it like, wow, what are we going to do?
Absolutely. I mean,
sorry, interrupting, you would have been deep into planning already, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden.
But I was also deep into cancer recovery.
Yes. Yeah.
So I got back, I had the beauty of being able to plan and work without the kind of noise back in the UK, came here mid-February, and I got back actually in the Caribbean 600 started, and I was already, couldn't believe how many people were around and close together, because in the UK there'd already started to be this frisson of and I'd been wearing a mask. That's a bizarre thing, but that was because of me and my fear of infection wherever I went. So I got back here, and I think interestingly, the team that were working on the 600, when they got back to the UK, they couldn't believe the change, because they've been out here 2 weeks, and because things were moving so fast. So, I mean, obviously everything changed overnight, and we did make a decision quite early that we thought we should cancel, because there was no way we could deliver the event safely. And then there was an email that came in. We decided to poll the sailors, because you can sit there and, we're not medical experts. We have no real idea, but we know everyone's terrified. Yeah. We know it doesn't feel like it's going to be safe. We know travel's shutting down. But we're still getting emails from sailors going, can I come? I want to come. I can get on my boat and come. Yeah. So we sent out an email and said, do you still want to do it? If you do it, will you be happy if the event isn't the same? I.e., you won't be getting together after racing in the bar. No, you might go on your boat, and you'll stay on your boat, and you'll go to your accommodation, come back. And one sailor replied and said, hell no. If I come, I expect absolutely the same, and if I don't get it, I'm never coming back. And that was when we sat
really
there.
Strident,
it really was, yeah. And of course, you can kind of say, come on, it's just, that's ridiculous. But at the same time, it makes you go, well, hang on, you're really changing the brand. You're not delivering on your brand, because even though I've said the changes in Sailing Week over the years meant that the focus had been lost on the sailors, equally, the fun was always really important.
Absolutely.
But the stuff had gone wrong on the water, which helped cause the issues, but fundamentally, you've still got to have that fun happening. And so last year, it was like, well, that was a nail in the coffin. But of course, it wasn't our final decision in the end, because the government also is saying,
your decision was made for you.
Yeah, how are you going to do that? And I think then the frustrating thing, because all the events kind of collapsed over a week. That was it. We're all out. We can't do this. And everyone literally collapsed. It's calamity, because you gear up for an event. You never really get the funding till you're in it, even from the sponsors in a lot of cases. And you've had to spend money. So now you've got financial, challenges. But then worse than that is not knowing when you can start again and when you can go and get funding and where the funding might come from. And I think hopefully, I think we might now be coming through that.
Yeah.
So a year on, we're doing a virtual sailing week. You might have seen we're going to be doing some really exciting things. And I think with the vaccination programmes everywhere in the world, then that's what's giving hope. So I think once the UK, Europe and US racing seasons kick off, which they're starting to, the confidence will come back, and I think we're going to have a huge year next year, generally, not just sailing week. But
I think you're right. And, you know, you mentioned the year on. It's incredible, isn't it, to think that we've been in this situation for the whole year. So going back to the other C word, the cancer thing. Yeah. So how did that rear its ugly head?
Yeah, literally. So, I mean, interestingly, I had started to learn to sail. I kind of almost, I don't know, that was back in September 2018, and I'd been to the UK to Market Sailing Week. As usual, I was knackered, doing too much, too many hats, too little focus, but loving it, because that's what I'm like. Yeah, that's who I am. And I got back and thought, I'd been out on the race course in a rib with our race manager Lorna and Trish, our PR. And we were going around looking at the starts and all the classes, and there was a class called the Seaview, what are they called, Lorna? The Seaview, she will know, 28-footish, 3-person dinghies. And she was basically commentating because somebody had tacked too soon and they were going to go below the mark, and it was all really exciting. And I sat there and I said, I like the look of that. That's it. I'm actually finally going to learn. But I wanted to do dinghy sailing. Yeah. So when I got back, I called Elizabeth, and I think it was about a week later that I managed to get down here, and I just got hooked immediately. Yeah. So I was sneaking out from the job.
Sneaking out.
Not sneaking at all, but I was starting work early, 6 o'clock in the morning. So three or four times a week, I could get down here and sail and carry on doing stuff. Yeah. I was really, you know, I was working out. I felt fit and healthy. I felt better than I felt in years, and I think that is the shocker. And I think for anyone, you know, that lots of people said to me, "I can't believe it. You're fitter than you've been." Yeah. You know. But as a friend who'd had cancer said when she came to see me in hospital, "But Al, I know that you've been really fit and healthy, and I hadn't been working the hours. I kind of felt like I'd finally got things actually to, So I was working hard, of course, but really working out hard and really enjoying life." And she said, "But, you know, okay, you're not at work, but you're physically still punishing your body. Yeah. And you're just overdoing it." And I said, "Yeah, I guess I am." Well, obviously I am, you know, lying there with my leg up in the hospital. Yeah. And so I'd finished sailing week, and I think this was the hard thing. Every year after sailing week, you are exhausted, and it can take 2 and 3 months sometimes to get over it, because it's just round the clock. It's relentless. And once you finish, the pack down, the finances, the reviewing where you're going, and then going straight back out on the road to market and start trying to get range sponsorship, you know, so the cycle continues. Yeah. And of course, there's the frustration that lots of businesses manage to slow down and close down, and you're still at it, and you kind of feel like a rabbit on the wheel. So although I got back out sailing, I'd started coming back down here, I was feeling a little bit ropey, but just thought it's the usual sailing week malaise, you know. And long story short, one day I was in the office and my leg felt really stiff, and I did what I always do when I'd been sitting too long, and got on the floor and put my legs in the air against the wall, you know, nice yoga pose.
Yep, absolutely.
And I breathed. I thought, oh, I feel better. And I went to the bathroom and I came back and I thought, oh, this leg still feels a bit weird. And the next day my leg blew up, or that night actually my leg blew up. And I remember I called someone for advice, and they said, "I think you need to get to the doctor." And I went to emergency, and at the time they didn't think it was a blood clot, which is what it ended up being. And by Sunday night, long story short, rushed into hospital here in Antigua, and I was diagnosed with DVT, and then they gave me a CT scan, and they could see the tumour, which was basically in my groin area. Okay. And I was there 8 days, and my leg was elevated. I wasn't allowed off the bed. Right. And it was terrifying because they thought it was non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is what it ended up being, but there's many types of it. And what was explained to me was with the prognosis and with the speed of tests, etc., it may well be better if I go back to the UK because of just how fast the process might happen, and then whether there was the treatment, the absolute individual treatment. So bizarrely, with having had DVT, I got back on a plane. I got on a plane, which many people say, how do you travel with that? But I've now learned that you can once it's past a certain point.
Right.
And went straight away into the UK to a doctor. Got seen within about a week and a half, and a week and a half later I was diagnosed, and a few days later I started my treatment plan. So it was about 5 or 6 weeks from the beginning of the nightmare to, in all honesty, this is the bizarre thing, that we stayed with my brother, and the day I got my results and it was confirmed that I had non-Hodgkin's, which I'd heard of, I knew, and as the doctor said to me, it's okay because this is one of the good cancers to have.
And you're like, okay, is there a good one?
Exactly. And he explained that the prognosis was good. It was 70% that I would get through. And of course I had my wobbles going, oh, that means it's 30% that I might not. And my husband said, no, you're going to get there.
Focus on the 70%.
And we went out and celebrated that night. And I felt so relieved because I knew what it was and I had a plan. And I felt like, okay, someone's taking control of this situation. That's the funny thing where the structure came
to an illness, right?
Yeah. And I'd say, that this is going to sound really weird. One day I was walking through the park in Sheffield and I was on my own, and it was a beautiful cold, one of those gorgeous crisp blue sky English days, and I'd been to yoga, and my sister-in-law dropped me off at the top of the park. I said I wanted to walk all the way through, and I'm skipping along listening to Chronics, and one of the things I've been told was I must walk, keep walking, and part of that because of my leg, but also with the chemo it's great, to help your body feel better and to excrete the cancer cells, purge the crap. And I'm walking along the roads, and in my head I honestly said, I'm so pleased I've got cancer.
Okay.
Because and then I thought, this is really weird. And I say Chronics because it's a few times in my life, I went to, and that was an interesting thing because I went to see his concert in 2018 early. And I honestly felt like it was a changing point in my life. There was just something about that concert here.
Pivotal thing.
And I just went down the road with a smile on my face. And I can remember phoning people going, this is really bizarre. I've just had this thought, I'm pleased I've got cancer. And obviously I wasn't pleased I had the disease, but I think it was the time out to reassess priorities in life.
It was gifting you that space,
totally, and the time to slow down and the time to think about what the heck I was doing. And I think appreciate where we're at in life, appreciate the friends. One of the big things that changed for me, I realised I'd become someone who was not scared, but just didn't ask for help, because I felt I was always the person being asked for help. I therefore had to be the helper constantly. And my friends in the UK rallied around, my friends here. It was just unreal, and I felt so loved. I felt so looked after by everyone.
And your vulnerability came through, and it was okay to be that.
Which generally it is, I'm not that hard-nosed, but at all. But so it was a good experience. What can I say? It was a foul experience in terms of the treatment, in terms of the mental challenges, I suppose, of fearing and then thinking, put it back in a box. You're fine. You're doing what you need to do. The lump's gone down. The lump's disappeared. Within a week of my first chemo, I could hardly feel the tumour, and it was a big tumour. But there's that fear of the unknown. You just don't know. And then as you go through the treatment, obviously there's the slowing down, and you feel it more, and it just affects you for longer. And then bizarrely, when I'd had my last treatment, I remember coming out of the hospital, and thank goodness I'd read about this, where people say you have this panic because suddenly what now? No structure. So being someone who thinks I don't like structure, suddenly found out, that's quite good, actually. And, I guess just people keeping you on track. So we found out, we got a phone call. I had an appointment on after Christmas, had a scan, been away, had a wonderful new year, lots of walking, starting to feel much better, full of hope, and had a scan, and then started worrying. And my appointment was the following Tuesday, and at 6 o'clock the Friday before the appointment, the doctor phoned and let me know I was absolutely 100% clear. And I mean, that was, it was amazing. He's an NHS doctor who's taken the time to call me, said, I got the results and I knew you'd want to know now and not spend all weekend worrying.
Yeah.
And again, then I was like, oh my goodness, so life can go back to normal. And I was scared. That, to be honest, at that point, I'm like, ugh, because there's things I'm supposed to have changed. There's things, oh my gosh, I had a list. I mean, bizarrely, you know, one of the things on my list was get on your iPhone and delete those 20,000 photos. And they're just still there.
Yeah.
About coming back and letting it all just come back in and happen again. And I think some people would sit there and look at me now and say, well, you're really busy again, so you've let it. But in my head, I haven't.
No.
And I'm quite different.
Because you're a different person.
Yeah.
So would you define it as before cancer and after cancer, that there's been this pivotal shift in the way that you look after yourself and you view your life going forward?
Yeah, I think so. I know so.
Yeah.
You know, and I especially physically, I just give into it. If I'm tired, I'm tired. If, you know, and I'm less, I'm going to do a hike every day and go kayaking every day. I'll do what I want to do. So that's where the lack of structure comes in, because I don't like to commit too much.
More forgiving to yourself?
Very much more. Yeah.
Cool.
And I feel healthier. You know, I still, of course, I've got challenges. I've got challenges with lymphedema because the lymph nodes are damaged, but that's fine. I'm living an active lifestyle, which means that won't become a problem. I fear about that when I get older sometimes. I think, oh, you know, what happens? And then I think, well, I just have to pay someone to rub my leg.
Yeah, you'll work your way through. I guess the thing is, you're so grateful to be here.
Yeah.
That basically you're going to deal with whatever you need to deal with to keep being here, right?
Yeah.
That's your focus.
Exactly. And and this is really strange. I remember thinking to myself, the experience I've just had, if everyone could have it in life without the cancer, people's lives would, I think, be better. And lo and behold, we get COVID, and I suddenly realised everybody's just had the same experience without there is the fear of the health, and obviously some people have been through tragic and awful things. But if you haven't had COVID, then mentally you've been through a very similar thing, you know, and the feeling of isolation and the challenge of what you're going to do with your life, and oh my God, what's it all about? And
I think that's such a massive awareness that you've brought awareness to there, that we've all had this collective experience. And whenever I talk to anyone about COVID, you know, some of us have had really bad stuff go on, yet equally there's been so many gifts. And it's that ability to be able to say, yeah, it's been pretty shit at times. However, look what we might have learned and gained from this. And, you know, as the collective, we can do that and we can choose to change.
Absolutely. And I think, again, you know, for many people, the reconnection with family digitally, obviously the lack of touch and feel has been awful. But that, again, has had people reaching out. What I fear for, and, you know, the images we saw, I guess, from overseas, from the UK over Easter, where people are allowed to go out in the park and you see the debris left behind again, that makes me think, oh, you know, we haven't moved on, we haven't learned. But then...
It's human nature, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's things that we've learned, and I think we just, as societies globally, we have to start bringing the awareness and calling ourselves out on our own bullshit and calling our neighbours out on their bullshit and reminding them why we're doing it, though, so that we can come together in this connection. We could talk for hours and we won't. It's been an amazing conversation, and I'm really grateful for you to be here with us.
Thank
and
you.
To be so candid, and we'll make sure that all the links are out there.
Thank you.
With this conversation, so people know where to get you, and basically just carry on being amazingly awesome.
Thank you.
Full of life.
I wanted to add one thing, which because thank you. It's the first time I've spoken publicly about the cancer. Not everyone knows that I went through it, and I just say to anyone that is going through it, just find someone to talk to, and if you haven't got anyone, you can ask me, because it is something. What I found, I was very lucky to have a couple of close friends that have been through cancers, different cancers, well, one the same, one different, and their guidance took so much fear out of it for me. The storytelling about what might come next and what your options are and advice was invaluable, and so I think everybody needs that guidance, and that really, really helps, even if it's not someone you know closely. And just ask for help. That's
and asking for help is okay, right?
It's absolutely okay.
Strong women, we can still ask for help.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
Awesome. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Da, da, da.